On the chilling night of August 15th, 717 AD, Emperor Leo III stood atop the battlements of Constantinople, overlooking the straits of Bosphorus. The glinting armor of the Umayyad army, led by Caliph Sulayman, spread like the sea of menace on the horizon. The scent of saltwater mixed with the tang of metal and sweat, capturing the essence of a civilization on the precipice. Arrayed before the city walls, the Arab forces marked the second time in a generation that the Islamic Empire sought to capture the jewel of the Byzantine Empire. Earlier that day, Leo III had convened a clandestine meeting with his generals and advisors, including the esteemed Patriarch of Constantinople. The discussions were intense and fraught with anxiety. Constantinople's defenses were formidable but worn. The massive chain blocking the Golden Horn was a psychological deterrent as much as a physical one. This was a moment of reckoning, not just for the empire, but for Christendom itself. As the Umayyad navy attempted to circumvent the chain and their ground forces probed the city's fortifications, it became clear that this was more than a mere military confrontation. The outcome of this siege could redraw the map of a world divided between the cross and the crescent. At stake was not just territory, but the legacy of Rome and the future of Christianity in the East. In a stunning turn of events, a series of Byzantine naval victories and a harsh winter set the stage for the lifting of the siege by August of 718. The resilience and ingenuity of the defenders had prevailed. Was Leo III a savior of Christendom? Or was he simply using it as a tool to lift the spirits of his people during the war? How did Christians go from being the simply favored religion of the Roman Empire to imposing its will upon other nations? Join us today on Historical Quarrels as we unpack these questions and more. Drawing inspiration from Sun Tzu, who proclaimed, "Opportunities multiply as they are seized," let us delve into the intricate layers of this third slice of a religious historical quarrel. Welcome back, whirlers, fighters, intellectual master debaters to Historical Quarrels. First and foremost, I want to give a big thank you to everyone listening and a big welcome to everyone who's new to the show. Your guys' support means the world to me, and it's really helps me push myself to get better at this. Seriously, I love you all. I can't wait to get a chance to interact with more of you as more emails come in. It has been great. I've loved every moment of it. I didn't realize how much fun I'd have responding to emails of mostly people being like, "Hey, you pronounced this wrong, you dipshit." But, I love your show. Stuff like that. It was a lot of fun. It was a good time. And, Jonathan, you know who you are. Johnny, or I think that was your name that you went by. Start with a J. You know who you are. Loved that little interaction we had. It was really cool. So. As always, this show is very NSFW, and you might want to avoid listening to it on a speaker where children or your neighbors can hear it if you want to avoid future awkward glances and interactions with them when they overhear you listening to some guy sing about how scapegoating is so much fun and they can't wait to kill everyone. So possibly best to avoid that if possible. Or, don't avoid that if you're an energy vampire and feed off that shit. Like, I get it, You just got to eat. Am I right? So if you don't get what I'm referring to, please go listen to last week's episode on an Emperor Constantine. And you can skip to the hour and I think 2-minute mark is where it starts. And then you'll get it. So today we are going over the events that happened after Constantine the Great's death up to the second Umayyad invasion of Constantinople. And a few events that happened right before the birth of Empress Irene, whose life we will cover next week. And will be the last episode in this 4-part series or breakdown of religious influence / quarrels in the Roman Empire between paganism and Christendom. So I will be recording both of these episodes back to back today, as I will be going on a vacation. and will be out all of next week. So, if you do try and contact me and I don't answer, realize I'm not sure how my cell service is going to be in the area that I'm going to. So don't think that I'm ignoring you. I'm just in an area probably where I can't speak to you immediately. But as soon as I get back and as soon as I can, I will respond. Because like I said, I really do enjoy talking to you guys. Yeah, if you guys like how these episodes are structured in this quote unquote series, please let me know. I am considering doing this from time to time, where I take a big topic or idea like pagans versus Christians and finding either where it started and how it developed over time with leaders, or finding a couple different conflicts and demonstrating how it was used there. It doesn't have to just be religious ideas or events either. It could be something like culture versus culture, like how this cultural stagnation, degraded an empire and caused a bunch of conflicts with other empires. Just kind of like broader concepts that I can, or like a general concept where I can take like a few episodes to kind of build up an overall thesis or like point towards it, like I'm doing with this. But yeah, so again, today, going over events after Constantine the Death's Great up to Empress Irene's birth. The next week, we'll be going over the life of Empress Irene, one of the coldest bitches in history. Crazy shit for today. So that's enough preamble. Let's go ahead and get into this historical quarrel, motherfuckers. So in AD 337, we have the death of Constantine the Great. The death of Constantine the Great marked a critical juncture in the history of the Roman Empire and early Christianity. Constantine had fundamentally changed the religious landscape of the empire, legitimizing Christianity through the Edict of Milan in AD 313. His death, therefore, raised questions about the future direction of the empire and the newfound Christian orthodoxy he had helped establish. Constantine's body was transferred to Constantinople and interred in the Church of the Holy Apostles, a statement of the growing significance of this new Rome and its deeply Christian character. Upon his death, the empire was divided among his three sons, Constantine II, Constantius II, and Constans. Lots of Consts. Const. Must have really liked the beginning of his name, like his dad did. Maybe it was just tradition. Anyways, this division was not a new practice. It followed a well-established Roman tradition of parceling out regions of control among family members. However, the arrangement was fraught with tension and led to immediate challenges. Each son was a less formidable ruler than their father, lacking both his military prowess and his diplomatic skill. Within a short time, sibling rivalries would escalate into full-blown conflicts, culminating in a series of civil wars that would destabilize regions of the empire. As is typically the case with most great men, their kids, who didn't have to work as hard for their position and earn what they have, will squander it away, sadly, as they don't have a full understanding of the sacrifice and dedication it took to achieve that. So they, in turn, don't value it as much. I also like to frame this by comparing how we feel about things, So let's say you want this expensive luxury item that you don't need, but it would be really nice to have. Okay. So you work 60 hours a week and put away the extra 20 hours of your life into savings in a dollar amount. Okay, now you do that, and it takes you like 6 months of doing that, and you have invested 480 hours of your life to get this item, essentially by working those extra hours. That is 20 full days of your life spent working to get this item. If something were to happen to that item, you have now just wasted all that time and effort working for it for nothing, essentially. And it would devastate you, right? Like, you'd be a lot more pissed. Now imagine you get that item for free. You won't care nearly as much because, well, at least you got for free, right? So that's how Constantine's kids were with his empire. They got it handed to them and were greedy, thinking they deserved it more than their other siblings, when in fact none of them really deserved it. Because none of them had to work their ass off to build it into what it became. I guess you can kind of argue that Constantine had to take an empire that was dividing itself and then he reunified it. So he actually had to put in work to get the empire where it was at when they took over. The three brothers initially adhered to their father's commitment to Christianity, but the religious unity that Constantine had so painstakingly built began to fracture. Disagreements over Arianism again, and other theological debates simmered and sometimes boiled over, leading to periods of persecution and discord. The co-emperors themselves were embroiled in these religious disputes. They love to fight using the Bible. They're like, nah, Jesus meant this. And they're like, nah, Jesus totally said this. Reading the same passage. They'd be using ecclesiastical matters as another theater for their political rivalries, essentially to garner support. This is where we really start to see the utilizing of the new favored Christian religion and politics together to gain support from the masses to gain more power. Whereas Constantine may have legitimately had faith in the religion, these guys definitely didn't. Well, I guess I don't know them, but from what I read, it just seems like they used it to control people. They used it as a tool, and Constantine might have actually had a legitimate faith in it, or at the very least, believed in the God aspect of it. So then, let's go ahead and take a look at how his sons used that. So Constantus II, perhaps the most active of Constantine's sons in utilizing religious disputes for political ends, he was an ardent supporter of Arianism and really hated people that didn't have blonde hair and blue eyes. Literally, anyone who didn't fit that description was executed on the spot. Yeah, not really. But if you listened last week, you'd know that Arianism is a theological view that contested the nature of the divinity of Jesus Christ. So by backing Arianism, Constantus II could differentiate his reign from his father's and consolidate his power among an Arian-supporting faction within the church and the military. Basically, soldiers who were like, nah, Arians are right. They got the right idea, would follow him and, dissent from other factions that were supporting maybe his brothers or something. I mean, he probably had a big chip on his shoulder as well, being the son of Chadicus Constantine the Great, which, to be fair, I would as well. I mean, the guy was fucking awesome. So his support for Arianism allowed him to depose or sideline Nicene bishops, replace them with Arian clergy, and thereby gain the religious justification for his rule. Constantine II, the eldest of his Constantine's sons, initially ruled the western provinces and seemed to have a more conciliatory stance toward religious matters. He's a little more, I don't give a shit. However, his short reign, which ended in 340 AD, when he was killed fighting his brother Constans, didn't offer much opportunity for using religious disputes as political tools. Constans, who was the ruler of the Western Roman Empire, following the death of Constantine II, Constans was a supporter of the Nicene Creed, unlike his brother Constantius. Constans used his pro-Nicene stance to earn the loyalty of the Western clergy, the Synod of Rome, and the Council of Sardica, both of which took place under his auspices, were attempts to solidify his rule through religious consensus. He essentially tried to take over the empire by getting all of the bishops and clergy and everyone to agree he was the holy one following the Nicene Creed that his father had established. But his brother Constantus II was like, nah, dude, fuck you, and decided to beat the shit out of him a little bit. Constantine's death also had an immediate impact on the geopolitical situation. Under his rule, the Roman Empire had been a significant military power, keeping at bay various tribes and kingdoms at its borders. His passing created a power vacuum that neighboring states and invading tribes such as the Visigoths and Sasanian Empire sought to exploit. The external pressure added another layer of complexity and instability to the already delicate situation within the empire. So then in 341 AD, we have a momentous shift in the treatment of paganism within the Roman Empire. As Constantius II, one of the sons of Constantine the Great, issued a series of far-reaching edicts that targeted the traditional religious practices of the Roman populace. These laws specifically outlawed key elements of pagan worship, such as sacrifices and temple ceremonies, which pissed off people because, by this point they had grown a fondness for sacrificing demon red-haired babies to their favorite deities, such as Bellicor, god of erections, and Gertrunicus, god of super good orgasms. After killing redhead children, a lot of the pagans would claim to have the best sex of their lives. And were understandably mad that they couldn't kill their lucky redhead slaves anymore for boner fuel. Which I get, Sucks, dude. As a ruler who was deeply committed to Christianity, Constantine II saw these pagan practices as threats to the Christianized Roman state that his father had begun to build. He intended for these laws to extinguish the remnants of the old faiths and hasten the complete Christianization of his empire. I'm clearly kidding about the redhead sacrifice thing, obviously. Romans actually liked redheads because they thought they were lucky and probably didn't kill them for some blood orgy pagan fun. Good old times there. The laws went beyond mere prohibitions. They outlined punitive measures for those who continued to engage in pagan rituals. Practitioners could face confiscation of property or even execution. Moreover, even attending such ceremonies could subject an individual to punishment, effectively seeking to stymie the generational passage of pagan traditions. Not only did these laws affect the everyday lives of civilians, but they also had repercussions for the Roman aristocracy, many of whom still adhered to traditional religious practices. You have to remember, not even 40 years ago, they were persecuting the shit out of Christians, and now all of a sudden, Christians are the ones in charge. So, yeah, a lot of the guys who were persecuting the shit out of Christians are still alive during this time. State officials and local authorities were put in the difficult position of enforcing these edicts, which were deeply unpopular in some circles. The introduction of these laws led to heightened tensions within communities and created a challenging environment for local governance. Now, Roman authorities had to choose between following the imperial edicts, thereby alienating large segments of the population, or turning a blind eye to traditional practices, thus risking the wrath of the Christian emperors. As stated earlier, Constantine II's edicts were an extension of his father Constantine's Christian vision for the Roman Empire. However, unlike his father, he took a more hardline approach. Where Constantine had promoted religious tolerance to some extent, Constantine sought to actively suppress any form of religious expression that did not align with Christian doctrine. Taking the approach that had totally worked out for the rulers before his father by doubling down on one type of religion and pissing off people. Clearly, Constantine II was a student of history and knew what was best. The resulting social and religious upheaval sowed the seeds for centuries of tension between adherents of Christianity and traditional Roman religions. The effects of these laws extended to the intellectual sphere as well. Philosophers, scholars, and teachers who were associated with pagan traditions found themselves increasingly marginalized. Educational systems that had once been the glory of the Greco-Roman world began to lose their diverse character, as Christian theology took precedence over classical teachings. And here is where we see that pretty much immediately the cycle of abuse begins anew, as the people who were abused become the abusers and persecute. Now, a big reason for it could be because that a few of the people who were persecuting them back in 311 AD might have still been alive. And so in many ways, it was them protecting themselves and getting payback. Did their kids need to be punished, though? Did their kids' need to be punished? That's the question. But, well, probably, yeah, because you never know what those little fuckers might end up doing if you don't punish them right, Obviously kidding. But not even 4 years after the death of a man who preached for religious tolerance, they started pulling this shit. Like, so fast. It's crazy. Some people really only care about power and nothing else. And so for the 20 or so years that Constantine II ruled, he started killing a bunch of other family members during that time. Because he would see them as potential rivals to the throne. Very typical shit at this point. And did it so much that he only had 2 family members left he could appoint as his VP, essentially. And so Julian the Apostate took over after his brother Gallus died. Leads us to 361 AD. Now, in 361 AD, we have the reign of Julian the Apostate. Julian, commonly known as the Apostate, ascended to the Roman throne after a series of tumultuous events following Constantine the Great's death. He was a nephew of Constantine, but differed sharply from his predecessors in his religious outlook. Julian sought to reverse the Christianization of the Roman Empire initiated by Constantine and strove to reestablish paganism as the state religion. His religious reforms aimed to systemize pagan religious practices, even imitating Christian charitable institutions to bolster the appeal of the pagan religion. He also reinstated traditional rituals and temples that had fallen into disuse or been repurposed for Christian worship. He was like, nah, none of that shit. We're going to take that all back, motherfuckers. This religious pivot was highly controversial. By Julian's time, Christianity had become deeply entrenched in the Roman Empire, not just among the common people, but also within the power structures of the state. The empire had invested in Christian institutions, and its legal systems had been modified to accommodate Christian doctrine. Julian's endeavor to revert to paganism, therefore, was met with stiff resistance from Christian leaders, and even led to discord among his advisors and officers, some of whom were devout Christians themselves. Julian was not merely content with changing religious policies. He took his campaign a step further by engaging in intellectual debates with Christian scholars, hoping to challenge the faith at a theological level. Now, oh boy, did he rip into them. And it is sad, but unfortunately, all of what Julian directly wrote was burnt in an anti-pagan riot. We do have books of people quoting him from what he wrote, primarily Cyril of Alexandria, who named Julian's book as one of the most important anti-Christian books ever written. And that, during its time, it was widely considered to be irrefutable, which makes sense. Which makes sense then as to why it was destroyed, because you can't have that shit like that wandering around when you're using Christianity to stay in power. Yeah, remove that. Here's some of the things that Julian would ask. This is a quote from Cyril. Julian goes on to discuss the creation myths of the Greeks and the Jews, citing the account of the book of Genesis. He ridicules the idea of literally interpreting the Jewish account, claiming that it is not only logically impossible. He asks how the serpent was able to speak a human language, but that it is also blasphemous and insulting to God. A true God, he says, would not have withheld the knowledge of good and evil from men, or been jealous of men eating from the tree of life and living forever. Indeed, this behavior shows God to be evil, and the serpent giving man the enormously valuable gift of differentiating good and evil to be good. Therefore, it must have a deeper meaning. In addition, he would basically ask other people, end quote, by the way, from the reference. He'd ask other people, to quote, so y'all believe in this Jewish God, and he makes his people cut their dicks, and yet y'all ignore that rule, but are fine forcing others to obey other rules. Essentially calling them out for being hypocrites. He does that a bunch. In all of this, Julian makes a bunch of honestly very fair points and points out a lot of issues that will go on to be asked again in a different light by future people who go on to create different sects of Christianity, like Martin Luther, and all the other Protestant-esque religions that fucking suck the fun out of everything. So, But then there's a lot of modern day questions that, people have asked now and have led to this almost exodus out of religion for a lot of people, which is crazy. It's just crazy that Julian was asking all those questions that modern day people are asking and pointing out now too. Julian's reign was too brief for his philosophical arguments to gain much traction, or his religious reforms to take deep root. Despite the brevity of his rule, his reign serves as an illuminating flashpoint that revealed the depth of the empire's transformation under Christian influence. In AD 363, Julian embarked on an ambitious military campaign against the Sasanian Empire, Rome's eastern rival. It was a poorly planned venture that ended in disaster. Julian was wounded in battle and eventually died due to a hemorrhage from the wound. Libinius, who was Julian's mentor in his youth, would go on to state that Julian was in fact assassinated by Basil of Caesarea, who was a prominent theologian who supported the Nicene Creed and was known to use political connections to push policies into place that would support the church and fellow followers of the creed. As with many accusations of this kind, there isn't much evidence to go off of other than the fact that Basil would have a clear motive for having Julian killed, as Julian was actively trying to stop the Christian church from having positions of power in the government. Julian's successor, Jovian, promptly reverted the empire's religious policies back in favor of Christianity, solidifying the faith's position as the dominant religion in the Roman Empire, which is another reason why Basil probably did actually try and have him killed, and why he wasn't treated in the hospital. They did try and take care of him, but that hemorrhage kind of came out of fucking nowhere. So, he's probably assassinated. Just a little bit of assassination going on from the church. Very Christ-like behavior, That's what Jesus would like you to do, is assassinate your enemies to make sure the church stays in power. Because that's what Jesus teaches us to do. That's how you love one another. You kill them. You kill them and you fuck them up. Okay. Now we have the Battle of Adrianople in AD 378, which was a monumental clash between the Roman Empire and the Gothic tribes, particularly the Visigoths. The engagement took place near the town of Adrianople, or present-day Turkey, and was one of the most disastrous defeats suffered by the Roman army. Emperor Valens, eager to win a quick victory over the Goths, who had been causing unrest, led the Roman forces himself, but misjudged the strength of the Gothic army. The Romans were unprepared for the Gothic's cavalry power and skill, contributing to their defeat. Ramifications of this military catastrophe reverberated far beyond the immediate loss of life and prestige. It exposed vulnerabilities in the Roman military tactics and organization, heralding a need to reform that would come too late to save the Western Roman Empire. Many historians consider the Battle of Adrianople a milestone marking the decline of Rome's military supremacy, and the beginning of the end for the Western Roman Empire. In essence, it demonstrated that the barbarian tribes, long considered to be inferior in military prowess, could effectively challenge and even defeat the once invincible Roman legions, which is it really fucked up a lot of people's mental states. Battle had a very significant socio-political consequence. The heavy loss of Roman life, including that of the emperor, left the empire vulnerable to further invasions and internal strife. It forced Rome to rethink its policies toward the so-called barbarian tribes, leading to more inclusionary policies out of necessity. Many Goths were subsequently integrated into the Roman army, a move that brought both advantages and disadvantages. While it temporarily bolstered Roman military ranks, it also introduced elements of instability, as these troops often held divided loyalties. For this, for us to understand, it'd be like if someone who routinely beat the fuck out of your family members or friends ended up becoming your boss. Because the guys you originally worked for essentially sold out and let the guy buy the business. Not only that, but after that asshole took over, they then told you to go beat up and fuck your cousins. And when you tell him, that's fucking disgusting. How dare you ask me that? He just says, I'll pay you like $100,000 if you do it. And yeah, if you let me watch, I'll give you $100,000, buddy. And he licks his lips, a little bit, and gives you a cold, dead stare that makes you want to puke. And then you take the money and you kill that son of a bitch and fuck his corpse. Yip, yip, yah, motherfucker. Ain't gonna be no cousin fucking for this guy. Basically, that's how this whole Roman buying tribes thing worked out for them. They'd give these guys money and they would routinely backstab them. Not all the time. I mean, kind of worked out every now and then, but eventually is what will lead to them getting completely fucked over. From a religious perspective, the defeat and the crisis that followed also had implications for the Christian church. The empire's apparent vulnerability led to debates among Christian intellectuals about the role of divine providence in earthly affairs. St. Ambrose, a prominent church figure, and others began to articulate a theology that balanced the concept of Christian empire with the practical realities of a state in decline. Basically, they came up with the most effective way to cope ever by saying, God can't interfere in certain things because, he doesn't have the time for it, God's going to be out partying in his heavenly rave trap house and doesn't have time for us mortals who sacrifice everything for him. It's not his job to take care of everything. Even though he's all powerful and demands our worship and complete obedience to his will. But since none of us can be perfect, we can't expect him to be perfect, and also always be there for us, right? So, because God is a little petty, and if someone decides to piss him off, it's only fair that like everyone suffers for it. Okay, it's fair. That's how God rolls. The Battle of Adrianople stands as a testament to the complexity and interconnectedness of military, political, and religious factors in the late Roman Empire. It wasn't merely a defeat on the battlefield. It was a pivotal moment that accelerated the myriad of forces pulling at the empire's fraying edges, just ripping it apart. So in AD 380, we have the Edict of Thessalonica that served as a huge declaration that catapulted Christianity from a tolerated religion to the state religion of the Roman Empire. They are officially the shit. More or less for the past 20 years, honestly 40 years, they'd already been kind of the state religion, more or less. Within, with the Roman emperors and everyone being in it besides Julian. But now this is the official stance of the Roman Empire. It's like, Christianity is it. It's the shit. Everybody needs to obey it. Jesus is white now. Okay? It's always been Roman. It was never something that broke off from Judaism. Okay, so issued jointly by Emperors Theodosius I, Gratian, and Valentinian II, the edict mandated that all subjects of the Roman Empire should adhere to the version of Christianity that recognized the Council of Nicaea's creed and theological declarations. Nicene Christianity became not just a permitted faith, but the only legally sanctioned form of religious expression, making this edict a defining moment in the Christianization of the Roman Empire. Which, here we go, guys. This is where religion and politics comes into deep play again, marking yet another spiral of scapegoating. Again, if you listened to last week, you know what I'm talking about. So the language of the edict was unambiguous and left little room for interpretation. It specifically stated that those who did not follow the Nicene Creed were to be considered foolish madmen and faced harsh consequences. They would also coin the terms heathens, idiots, cabbage crotch, wart fuckers, hairy mongrel, floozies, and finally, duro assassino, or pain in the ass. In one fell swoop, the edict elevated the Nicene Christianity to unparalleled heights, while relegating all other religious systems, including paganism and non-Nicene Christian sects, to the margins. Even within the sphere of Christianity, the edict had the effect of delegitimizing non-Nicene theological viewpoints, labeling them heretical. Basically, if you don't follow this exact way that we think Jesus, meant for us to follow him, you're going to die because you're a heretic. The promulgation of this edict had immediate and far-reaching consequences. Temples dedicated to traditional Roman gods were closed down or converted into Christian churches. State-sponsored persecution of pagans became more widespread and systematic, and also fun. You could go out, beat the shit out of a pagan, and face no consequences. In all reality, it's the same shit that the pagans were doing to Christians. I think people just like beating the shit out of each other. The public practice of pagan rituals already dwindling due to previous edicts like those of Constantine II, was now considered a criminal act, punishable by a variety of means, including property confiscation and exile. Again, literally the exact same shit the pagans were doing. Which, to be fair to the Christians, this was pretty Christ-like behavior, as Jesus is, as we all know, was very known for beating the fuck out of anyone who crossed him. Like that verse in the Bible where the guy slaps him and, Jesus football punts him into the stratosphere, saying, "Verily I say unto you, that he without sin cast the first stone, and he without sin has a mean-ass hand, motherfuckers." Or something like that. I don't know. I haven't read the Bible in a minute. In the societal fabric that I have read the Bible. I know what verse I'm quoting, but still. Just so people don't think that I'm, just actively shitting on it without having done my research. I served a a mission for 2 years and definitely have studied religion quite a bit extensively. So, yeah, know what I'm talking about. Know what I am talking about. In the societal fabric, the edict led to the escalation of tensions between the Christian and pagan communities. As stated earlier, previous laws had already rendered pagan practices illegal, but this edict was a clarion call to intensify these efforts. Like, again, go out and start hunting these pagans. We need to start hunting them. Get them the fuck out of here. Social mobility became increasingly tied to Christian affiliation. Access to certain occupations, roles in the government, and military ranks were progressively restricted to those who adhered to Nicene Christianity, creating a form of religious apartheid or segregation in the empire. Furthermore, the edict empowered the ecclesiastical hierarchy and, by extension, the Bishop of Rome, who would eventually become the Pope. Right, Bishop of Rome can become the Papa, the Grand Poobah. With the state's backing, bishops were granted a wide array of powers, both religious and political, and they participated in the execution of laws against pagans and heretics. The church gained substantial financial and land assets from the closures and confiscations directed against pagan temples and institutions. Again, same shit, different religion. Really, the main people who suffer here are those not in power, just trying to live and survive, as those who are wealthy can just flip-flop all day long and not care because they keep their power. Religion is just a tool to manipulate the masses for these assholes. If you haven't listened to the previous episodes, you need to realize this is the exact same shit the previous pagan god emperors were doing. And it wasn't even that long ago for them. There were probably some Christians, pagans who were still alive and remembered how the pagans would persecute the Christians in the exact same way. It wasn't even one person ago for them that this change was taking place. Like, imagine if in 50 years from now, America goes from sadly primarily white people in power currently. I mean, it's sad, but it's true. White people are fucking, there's a lot of racism still, sadly. And like, even if you think there's no racism, there's, I'm trying to remember what it's called. But bias, there's like racial bias that happens a lot. And it's super fucked up. It's very prevalent in Utah. It's terrible. I hate it. I don't like that it happens. But, okay, but imagine essentially this, where we are in America. And then in 50 years, white people are now slaves and working on plantations, and all the other races are in charge. And it's just like, that's essentially what happened. They flipped of who was in power. But this time with religion, it was kind of easier for the face to stay the same because they could just be like, oh yeah, no, I reject paganism. Let me keep my money, please. It's just, it's kind of boggling to me how quickly all of this happened. Seriously, like 40 years from Constantine's death to that edict happening. Nuts. And then 10 years later, in the closing years of the 4th century AD, Theodosius I issued a series of decrees known collectively as the Theodosian Decrees, which have a profound and enduring impact on the Roman Empire's religious landscape. These decrees came in quick succession between AD 391 and 392. Their objective was unmistakable: to banish pagan practices and rituals from the empire entirely. It wasn't enough to start killing pagans, they had to destroy and replace history as well. This was a part of a larger movement started by St. Ambrose that I call Christian washing history, where the Christians began to replace old heroes of Rome with figures from the Old Testament, and essentially were trying to rewrite a bunch of shit through a Christian lens and declaring the Bible as a factual historical document that teaches the true history of Earth's creation and the laws that work for it. This is what will cause so many issues with science and human development later, as more emphasis will be put into how to be saved, quote unquote, after death through Christ, rather than understanding our world here, and anything that would disrupt that or take money away from those in power by losing members would be scrutinized and destroyed if possible. The decrees rendered illegal the public and private worship of pagan gods, mandated the closure of pagan temples, and forbade the conduct of rituals and sacrifices associated with traditional Greco-Roman religion. In effect, Theodosius sought to eradicate pagan practices from the social, political, and cultural milieu of the Roman Empire. Just get it all out. Gotta get all the fuck out of here. And Theodosius I was the devout Nicene Christian, and his rule signaled a radical shift in the empire's religious policies. While previous emperors like Constantius II had already paved the way by issuing laws against pagan practices, Theodosius took it several steps further. His decrees were comprehensive in scope, affecting everything from the grand temples that dotted the empire's cities to household altars. The sanctuaries that had once been centers of civic life and cultural identity were either closed, destroyed, or repurposed into Christian worship spaces. As stated earlier, Nicene Christianity had already been declared the state religion in the Edict of Thessalonica, but Theodosius' decrees made it clear that no other religious expression would be tolerated. What followed was an unprecedented wave of iconoclasm. Sacred groves were cut down, statues and altars were demolished, and the rich tapestry of myths and rituals that had been woven into the fabric of Roman life for centuries were suddenly cast aside. Intellectual endeavors associated with pagan philosophy also came under scrutiny, as any doctrine that questioned Christian orthodoxy was viewed with suspicion. You can't have people question that God really does speak to you, or the jig's up, and you don't get to be in power anymore. So that's why. The silencing of pagan thought and practices marked a significant loss in the realm of arts and sciences, as many works were either destroyed or relegated to obscurity. This is really what caused the Dark Ages, in my opinion, as the Christians had learned that if they allowed even a little bit of tolerance for them, the pagans had a good chance to rise up and take power away from them again. And many of the bishops had grown to be quite fond of their groves and money they had stolen by this point. Which, I get. Like, I stole a bunch of shit and thinking, maybe these people might want their shit back. I too might also enact some laws that protected me if I could do that. Luckily, I can't do that. So, that's good. The decrees also gave state officials and Christian clerics carte blanche to prosecute pagans, often leading to severe penalties. Punishments could range from fines and imprisonment to, in some cases, execution. These severe measures led to social turmoil and internal strife, but they also succeeded in further consolidating the Christian church's power. The church's influence extended not only in religious affairs, but also in political and judicial matters, solidifying the intertwined relationship between the state and the church. Meaning excommunication also meant getting executed as well. Yay! If I don't live up to an apostle standard set by a bunch of assholes, I could die. Wow, so cool. That's so cool, guys. So dope, dude. Moreover, the Theodosian decrees set a precedent for religious intolerance that would resonate throughout history. While aimed at unifying the empire under a single religious banner, these laws sowed the seeds of religious conflict and division for generations to come. They presented an ethical paradox that grappled with the limits of religious freedom, posing questions about state-sanctioned religious coercion and whether or not it's all right to do. Which, is totally fine to do. It definitely doesn't cause any problems or lead to the loss of, thousands of years of history or knowledge or anything like that. It's totally chill. So then in AD 395, we had the formal division of the Roman Empire into the Western Roman Empire with its capital at Rome and the Eastern Roman Empire, later known as the Byzantine Empire, with its capital at Constantinople, which at this point is it's been separate for years. It's kind of like this was them marking we're separate. We're not just one empire anymore. We're separate empires. The event was triggered by the death of Emperor Theodosius I, the last person to rule over a unified Roman Empire. Theodosius had two sons, Arcadius and Honorius, neither of whom were capable rulers. Arcadius inherited the Eastern Empire with its capital at Constantinople, while Honorius received the Western Empire, governed from Milan and later Ravenna. By splitting the empire, the inherent differences between the two halves were accentuated. The Western Empire was plagued by barbarian invasions, economic decline, and political instability. In contrast, the Eastern Empire, richer and more urbanized, had the resources to deal with external threats and internal dissensions more effectively. The division also had lasting religious implications. Although Christianity was the dominant religion in both empires, differing theological and liturgical traditions began to evolve independently, eventually leading to the East-West Schism in 1054. The papacy in Rome had more influence in the Western Empire, while the Patriarch of Constantinople held sway in the Eastern Empire. these ecclesiastical centers began to diverge in matters of doctrine, rights, and even politics. Another crucial aspect of this division was its impact on the longevity of the two empires. The Western Roman Empire would collapse just a century later, in AD 476, succumbing to incessant barbarian invasions and eternal decay. We'll get into a little bit more of it here in a bit. So, the Eastern Roman Empire, on the other hand, would survive for nearly a millennium. That's right. Technically, Rome lasted from, if we want to be technical about it, Rome and the Roman Empire lasted from, like 600 BC all the way up to 1453. Not even that long ago, like 600 years ago, Rome was still, like, at least what Rome had built lasted that long. It's insane to actually think about. The resilience of the Eastern Empire was due in part to its superior administrative structure, its strategic geographic location, and its more robust economy. Constantine had the right idea about moving the capital, y'all. The man was a fucking genius. Like, he knew it was all about location. Same thing with, like, if you guys don't play Civilization, the video game, you should definitely go play it. Try it out. It might be boring for some of you, but if you like tactical and strategy games, it's definitely the game for you. Because in the game, it's funny. There's a lot of events that you can mirror in history. So you could be Constantine here, move Rome's capital to Constantinople after you take over the area. Realize Constantinople gives you a better bonus to your food, your gold, and your production value. So your empire is able to build more things a lot quicker, pump out military units faster, and then you take over the world slowly. Anyway, sorry, I love the game. I love it. It's a lot of fun. The formal partition of the Roman Empire in AD 395 wasn't merely an administrative reorganization. It was the defining moment that set the two halves of Rome on distinct trajectories. These diverging paths would have lasting impacts on European and Middle Eastern history, influencing everything from religious traditions to geopolitical landscapes for centuries to come. Okay. 15 years later, we have the sack of Rome in AD 410 by the Visigothic king Alaric, which reverberated like a shockwave throughout the Western Roman Empire and the known world. Rome, once the indomitable center of the empire, was plundered by foreign invaders, an event that deeply shattered the empire's sense of invincibility. In fact, this was the first time Rome had been sacked in nearly 800 years, since the Gauls under Brennus invaded in 390 BC. The psychological impact on the Roman populace was immense, leading many to question the empire's future and even the divine favor of the Christian God, who had ostensibly replaced Rome's traditional pantheon. See, any of y'all believing listeners, if you're still here somehow, not just you that's gone through a cultural faith crisis. Nearly the entirety of Rome did once it fell. Alaric had initially served as a military leader for the Romans, but became disillusioned due to the poor treatment and broken promises by the Roman government. He was mad because they would use his butthole as a cum dumpster, but they weren't nice enough to use lube, you know? Back before the church took over, the senators were nice enough to use olive oil at least before they rammed you. But these priests, man, not a fan of lube. Instead, using holy water, and, you know, water is not a great lubricant. Lots of chafing probably hurt him. He was like, "That listen, I'm good if you use olive oil, but holy water, man, it hurts." And they're like, "No, take the dick. You take the dick with the holy water." Sorry, that was a little offensive to Italian listeners. I don't think I have that many Italian listeners, but I know the real reason for his betrayal was because he was promised land for his people to settle. He was promised payment multiple times for his services, but never got it, or he didn't get the exact amount that he was promised. So he then turned against Rome, aiming to carve out a homeland for his people within the empire. Despite laying siege to Rome twice before, it was on the third attempt that Alaric's troops successfully entered the city, primarily looting rather than systematically destroying it. Although the actual material damage was less than catastrophic, the symbolic value was unparalleled. The event was also profoundly consequential for the Christian Church, which was now the dominant religious institution in the Roman Empire. Christian writers, including Augustine, in his monumental work, City of God, wrestled with the theological implications of Rome's sack. The event fueled debates about the role of Christianity in public life and prompted questions about divine providence and the nature of suffering. Again, they just came up with more ways to fucking cope about how their God sucks. I mean, if they listened to Julian the Apostate, they would have realized he was right when he said, quote, "If the Jewish God is so great, then why do Jews keep getting fucking wrecked, yo?" End quote. I mean, clearly not the actual quote, but he did say something to the same effect, where he was like, you believe if this God is so powerful and he's all powerful, then why are the Jews constantly being enslaved? That's a little silly. And he brought that up to the Greeks, and the Greeks were like, yeah, but like, that's just how he is. It's like, so you guys want to keep getting enslaved then? And yeah, so it's, again, a little silly. The sack of Rome had a further destabilizing effect on the Western Roman Empire, which was already struggling with internal corruption, economic decline, and incessant barbarian incursions. Trust in imperial protection waned, and various parts of the empire began to look inward for security, often aligning themselves with local powers or even barbarian leaders. This fragmentation contributed to the weakening of the imperial structure, a decline that would culminate in the eventual fall of the Western Roman Empire in AD 476, which we will get to. I will get to it. We have like 2, 3, 4 more big events before we get to it. So here in 5 years later, in AD 415, we have the persecution of Hypatia. And this lady is fucking cool. I'm going to do a full episode on her eventually. Like I said, this series is more of like an overall statement on a big idea, but I can do an episode on her where it just focuses on her life and her struggles with Christian theocracy. I mean, you're going to get the ending spoiled here, but it's history. So the ending's always spoiled. You just want to know the full story. So we have the brutal killing of Hypatia in AD 415. It serves as a grim milestone in the history of early Christianity's relationship with paganism and the intellectual traditions of the ancient world. Hypatia was a renowned philosopher, mathematician, and astronomer, widely respected in Alexandria, a city famous for its great library and status as a center of learning. A committed Platonist, Hypatia was one of the last significant pagan intellectuals in a world increasingly dominated by Christianity. Her murder at the hands of a Christian mob led by followers of Cyril, the Archbishop of Alexandria, symbolized the precipitous decline of religious tolerance and intellectual freedom in the empire. Alexandria was a cosmopolitan city, a melting pot of diverse religious and philosophical traditions. By the time of Hypatia's prominence, however, tensions were already brewing between the Christians and pagans, aggravated by the radical changes in religious policies emanating from the empire's power centers. The balance of power had undeniably shifted in favor of Christianity, and with it came an increasing animosity towards paganism and its adherents. They were heathens. They were terrible people that needed to fucking get out. As stated earlier, laws have been enacted that severely restricted pagan practices, leading to the closure of temples and the proscription of rituals. In this increasingly fraught environment, Hypatia became a convenient scapegoat for Cyril and others who viewed her pagan beliefs and influence with suspicion. She was a witch! Burn her! Hypatia's death was not just the murder of an individual. It was an assault on the pluralistic intellectual traditions that flourished in Alexandria for centuries. Her killing was part of a broader context of religious zealotry and political intrigue. Cyril saw her as a threat, not just because of her pagan beliefs, but also because of her close relationship with Orestes, the Roman governor of Alexandria, with whom Cyril had a contentious relationship. So, she was in his favor, and he was like, oh, fuck, if he's the governor and I'm not in his favor, he can really fuck me over. So he essentially pissed off and outsmarted a bunch of Jesus-loving dudes and who had a very patriarchal view of the world due to the Bible saying women need to be quiet and such. And Hypatia was like, you're dumb, and that dumb little book you're holding doesn't make you any less dumb. Hypatia, honestly, is one of the coolest women in history for me. And I'd love to, like I said, I'm going to do a full episode on her eventually. But here's a quote about her that I found and I love, just so you guys can get an idea of who she was. There was a woman at Alexandria named Hypatia, daughter of the philosopher Theon, who made such attainments in literature and science as to far surpass all philosophers of her own time, having succeeded to the school of Plato and Plotinus. she explained the principles of philosophy to her auditors, many of whom came from a distance to receive her instructions. On account of self-possession and ease of manner which she had acquired in consequence of the cultivation of her mind, she not infrequently appeared in public in the presence of the magistrates. Neither did she feel abashed in going to an assembly of men, for all men, on account of her extraordinary dignity and virtue, admired her the more. Seriously, such a fascinating person who deserves more recognition. Anyways, for Cyril, her murder served multiple purposes. It eliminated a political rival, galvanized Christian sentiment against pagans, and sent a chilling message to other intellectuals who might be contemplating a challenge to Christian orthodoxy. That message being, fuck with us and you die, bitch. This dark episode also highlighted the growing power of the Christian clergy in matters of state and public opinion. The ability of a religious leader like Cyril to mobilize a mob against a respected intellectual signaled the extent to which the church had infiltrated all levels of society, from the corridors of political power to the streets. It was a chilling testament to the ability of religious fervor, when weaponized by those in positions of authority, to override social and moral norms. So in AD 431, we have the Council of Ephesus. It served as another critical juncture in the consolidation of Christian orthodoxy and the marginalization of alternative religious viewpoints, including paganism and various Christian heresies. Heretics. The Ecumenical Council was convened primarily to settle Nestorian controversy, a theological dispute regarding the nature of Christ and the status of the Virgin Mary. Nestorius, the Archbishop of Constantinople, had argued against calling Mary Theotokos, or God-bearer, a stance that roused significant opposition. The council declared Nestorius a heretic and affirmed Mary's title as Theotokos, thereby solidifying a particular interpretation of Christian doctrine. You know, they liked having Mary in their pantheon and didn't want people to fuck with it. That's essentially what happened here. While the council's primary focus was internal to Christian doctrine, its implications reached far beyond the inner workings of the church. By establishing a standardized form of Christian belief, the council further alienated those who held differing views, whether they were Christian heretics or adherents of other religions, particularly paganism at the time, because paganism was all the rage, again, not that long before. It's only been like one person since like paganism was the shit. The council's decisions were backed by imperial authority, underscoring the close relationship between church and state. Sorry, I'm a little sick today, so I'm trying to get over this cough. The partnership imbued the church with both moral and legal authority to suppress alternative religious practices and beliefs, a power that was increasingly wielded against non-Christians. And here's like one of my big issues with religion in general. There's like a bajillion different ways to interpret the scriptures. And everyone likes to pick and choose what fucking rule to follow and what rule not to follow. Like, kind of like Julian said, it's like, so you guys are cool with obeying like these rules, but then you think for some reason having to snip your dick doesn't apply to you. Wouldn't the God want you to obey all of his rules? And so you have to do everything that it says. In my opinion, I think that's honestly how it should be. It's like, it's all or nothing with the deity. And it makes sense for it to be all or nothing. And then, I don't know, you have people claiming, oh, I see, but that's not how it's supposed to be interpreted. It's supposed to be interpreted more like this. And then Jesus came and did away with a lot of the Old Testament anyway. He was like, listen, here's the new rule. Love another as I have loved you. That's essentially it. He's like, be good to each other. Don't be a dick. Obey God, respect him, give to God what, you need to give to God, and give to your state what you need to give to the state. Just a bunch of shit like that. And people seem to ignore that Jesus' main goal was to kind of do away with this very rigid structure of religion and kind of displace it with just, people who believed in him, and not start another church, but people, again, like power. And that's what churches are there for. They're there to control people. It's just one big Ponzi scheme, essentially. So the Council of Ephesus did not just represent the debate. It was part of the parcel of a broader societal transformation that had been underway since the reign of Constantine. Stated earlier, These laws and decrees that had systematically marginalized and even criminalized pagan practices continued to push them down and keep pushing them to the brinks of the empire. The council contributed to this trajectory by further embedding Christian orthodoxy in the socio-political fabric of the Roman Empire. They made it important to be, like, in society, to be Christian. If you weren't Christian at this point, you were ostracized. You were cast out, and you didn't have friends, and you couldn't be a part of, like, the group, and your chances of survival went down drastically. The explicit endorsement of Nicene Christianity by the council was a tacit of rejection of religious pluralism, strengthening the church's position as the arbiter of religious truth and moral authority, because humans had all the answers right as soon as the Bible was written. They didn't need to fact check themselves. They were the facts, and I swear to God, if you question it, I will beat your ass. Lovingly, as Jesus intended me to beat your ass. Very lovingly. As Christian doctrine became more strictly defined and institutionalized, it led to a sharpening of religious identities and boundaries. Those who did not adhere to approved Christian beliefs found themselves very isolated. Kind of like I had mentioned earlier. This marginalization extended to scholarly and intellectual endeavors as well. And here's a really big problem with that. That's where we start to get into the Dark Ages, because you get into this think of, no, we have all the answers. We don't need to look for any more answers. God tells us how we can live on after death. And while that's cool and all, and great for you, humanity still needs to advance, We don't need to, it caused this state of decay and stagnation of, no, just obey, you listen to me, I'm in charge, I tell you what to do, don't worry about anything, all you have to worry about is living a good life and dying. And then eventually people realized, oh fuck, our empire's getting weak, so we need more intelligent people, and that's the only reason why certain sciences were allowed to improve. It's really, really fucked up. So, okay. A few years later, in 451, we have the Council of Chalcedon. It was a pivotal moment, in AD 451, for those who would like to know. It was a pivotal moment in the shaping of the Christian doctrine of the Christian church itself. It was the fourth ecumenical council following the councils of Nicaea, Constantinople, and Ephesus. The council sought to resolve theological controversy surrounding the nature of Christ, which had divided the Christian community. More of this Arian shit coming up again. The most pressing issue was the relationship between Christ's divine and human natures, a theological dilemma that had been brewing for decades. Chalcedon's lasting contribution to Christian theology is known as the Chalcedonian definition. It poised that Christ is in two natures, without confusion, change, division, or separation, where the distinction of natures being in no way annulled by the union, but rather the characteristics of each nature being preserved and coming together to form one person of substance. This formula, this insane formula, I bet most of you don't get that. I barely understood that. Was crafted to counter various heretical views, notably Nestorianism, which overly divided Christ's two natures, and monophysitism, which overly merged them. Basically, him saying it was like an evolution, like an amalgamation, essentially. Jesus evolved into a god, but was already a god, but that nature needed to grow and develop in mortality. A little too confusing, and it's why, again, you can't take a lot of this shit literally. They essentially took the Bible way too literally, and this is why we get lost in the sauce and never figure out anything for another 1,000 years. The council's conclusions were not universally accepted, leading to a significant schism within the Christian community. Eastern Orthodox churches accepted the Chalcedonian definition, while the Oriental Orthodox churches, rising mainly of Coptic, Syriac, and Armenian churches, rejected it, adhering instead to Miaphysite doctrine, which posed that in Jesus Christ there are not two natures, but one composite nature. The schism resulted in mutual excommunications and an enduring ecclesiastical separation that persists to this day. The theological debates and divisions were deeply intertwined with the geopolitical landscape. The rejection of these definitions by certain regions not only had religious implications, but also fostered distinct identities that could sometimes be in opposition to the central rule of Byzantium. This had the effect of reinforcing regional identities and differences, further fragmenting the cohesion of the Byzantine Empire. Okay, guys, we made it. We're at the official fall of the Western Roman Empire in AD 476. It's often considered to be a pivotal moment in the world history, marking the end of an era and the beginning of the so-called Dark Ages. Which I honestly think the beginning of the Dark Ages started with, again, pushing out paganism and killing intellectuals. I think that's when it really began. But I guess you could mark this as a start. Okay. Odoacer, a Germanic military leader, deposed Romulus Augustulus, the last Roman emperor in the West, and sent the imperial insignia back to the Eastern Roman Emperor Zeno. This event was the culmination of years of decline, characterized by economic instability, internal strife, and again, they kept getting fucked up by the barbarian tribes. Yeah, again, in Civilization, if you play that game, let's say the barbarian tribes, some asshole just rapidly advances in science, and the barbarian tribes get a hold of some of those weapons. Your empire's fucked if any of them pop up near you, because you're not going to be able to kill your little weak infantry guy is not going to be able to kill a guy with a bazooka. It sucks. That's essentially what happened here. The barbarians advanced a little too quickly in military technology, and the Western Roman Empire couldn't keep up with it. It wasn't a sudden cataclysmic event, but rather the final acknowledgement of a very long process of decay. The Western Roman Empire had been weakening for decades, if not centuries, undermined by factors such as corruption, weak governance, and military defeats. External pressures from the Goths, Vandals, and Huns also contributed to the collapse, as did the division into the western and eastern halves, which considerably weakened it because they didn't have the eastern half anymore to support them. And the Western Empire's ability to defend itself effectively dropped. It'd be like if you lost your left arm. You can still defend yourself somewhat and do other tasks, but you'll probably lose in a fight to someone who has two arms, more than likely. And that's what happened here. A lot of these other empires had both their arms. Interestingly, while the fall of Rome in the West was taking place, the Eastern Roman Empire, also known as the Byzantine Empire at this point, continued to thrive and do so again for another millennium. The Eastern Empire inherited the Roman legal traditions and Greek culture, serving as a bridge between antiquity and the Middle Ages. It also protected much of the Roman and Greek intellectual legacy. Thank God. They're the reason why we have a lot of the information that we have today. The fall of the Western Roman Empire had profound implications for the Christian church. With the collapse of political authority, the church stepped in to fill the void, becoming the main unifying cultural and religious force in the West for centuries to come. They essentially saw some poor people in dire times and were like, listen, guys, you follow us, we'll take care of you. And that's what they did for the most part. They actually did take care of, some people. A lot of it was just to control them, but, they did some good. They're kind of fucked either way. So, in contrast, the Eastern Orthodox Church remained intertwined with the state in the Byzantine Empire, maintaining a different kind of relationship between church and state. Yeah, so we did it, guys. We got to the fall. Let's go ahead and keep going now, 50-ish years later. So we have the reign of Justinian I. And this guy's going to be very important to how the Christian church is going to keep interacting with other nations and start pushing start trying to push its belief onto other groups that it doesn't have direct contact or interactions with. And forcing other people, it's like conquering regions, but using religion as the reason for conquering the regions. Not just power and, because you want to conquer the world and be cool and shit like Alexander did. Not that anymore. It's because Jesus needs everyone to believe him, and he will make you do it through force if necessary. And Justinian I kind of starts us on that path. The Justinian I's reign was a monumental period for the Christian Church, which benefited from policies aimed at strengthening its role in the empire. Justinian sought to unify the empire under the banner of Orthodox Christianity and took several steps to marginalize competing religions and philosophical traditions. Early in his reign, Justinian issued edicts that effectively outlawed paganism. Again, pagans just keep getting fucked over. Temples were closed, sacrifices were banned. Again, all of that, it'll come up again where pagans are allowed to do certain things, and then they take it away. They're allowed to do certain things again, and then they take it away again. So it just got back and forth here for a while. But here, in AD 529, 2 years after Justinian I takes over, he ordered the closing of the Neoplatonic Academy in Athens, a decision that signaled the end of the traditional Greco-Roman educational system. This move forced intellectuals who subscribed to pagan philosophies to either flee to Persia or convert to Christianity. The shutting down of such a storied institution was a strong message. Christianity was the future, and paganism belonged to the past. Legal reforms encapsulated in the Corpus Juris Civilis also empowered the church. Ecclesiastical law was integrated into the larger body of civil law, and church properties were exempted from taxation. They shouldn't be paying taxes. Jesus can't pay a tax. You know, you pagans made Jesus pay a tax before, but no longer. Bishops were given a range of powers that included not only spiritual duties, but also roles in the governance of the empire. This was part of Justinian's larger strategy to use the church as an arm of the state, further consolidating his power and the Orthodox Christianity identity of the empire. Moreover, Justinian actively involved himself in theological disputes. He attempted to bring an end to the schism between the Chalcedonian Christians and the Monophysites with the Second Council of Constantinople in 553. Although these efforts were largely unsuccessful in resolving the differences, nevertheless, it reflected Justinian's desire to use his imperial authority to create a unified Christian doctrine, further entangling church and state. The flip side of this religious consolidation was the persecution of those who did not conform. Pagans, Jews, and heretical Christian sects found themselves increasingly marginalized. Practices completely outlawed now. Their properties have all been confiscated and or destroyed. Though Justinian's reign is often remembered for its achievements in law, architecture, and military conquest, it also set a precedent for religious intolerance that would influence Byzantine policy for centuries to come. So yeah, just really sad here. Okay, so now we have the 600s, and we have the rise of Islam. The emergence of Islam in the 7th century marked a transformative period in the religious and political landscape of the Byzantine Empire and the broader Mediterranean world. The rapid expansion of Islam under the early caliphs brought a new religious and political challenge to the Byzantine Empire, which found itself engaged in a series of military conflicts with Muslim forces. This transition, however, did not signify a cessation of the anti-pagan policies that had been codified and enforced since the time of Constantine and his successors. Rather, the Byzantine Empire continued its efforts to suppress pagan practices and rituals within its territories. As Islam became a more pressing concern for Byzantine leaders, the nature of religious tension in the empire started to evolve. While Muslim armies were increasingly clashing with Byzantine forces, the empire's internal religious policy remained focused on maintaining Christian orthodoxy and suppressing paganism and heresy. Even as resources and attention were redirected toward defending the empire against external Muslim incursion, the apparatus of religious enforcement aimed at paganism remained in place. They did not give a shit what was happening outside. They were going to eradicate them. And laws, again, that have already been implemented are being enforced rigorously. They are going at it now. My whole scapegoating song that I did last time, same thing here. They just loved it. They're having so much fun doing this shit. Okay? The rise of Islam also led to a certain degree of consolidation within Christendom. As the Byzantine Empire and other Christian territories faced a common enemy, this external threat underscored the importance of religious unity within the empire, thereby reinforcing the existing mechanisms of religious control and doctrinal enforcement. In essence, everyone had a common enemy, and so everyone needed to unite under one banner. And since they were already trying to push out all these other banners and like identities with religion, they figured, oh, fuck it, okay, too big of a deal, I'll just convert. And that's what happened to a lot of these people. They would just convert because they had bigger shit to deal with. So in essence, the rise of Islam introduced a new layer of complexity to religious dynamics within the empire. While the central focus of the state religious policies may have shifted, the underpinnings of an anti-pagan sentiment and legislation remained intact. In this way, the arrival of Islam on the geopolitical scene did not lead to a cessation of anti-pagan actions, but added a new dimension to the religious complexities of the time. Pagan communities continue to exist in a marginalized state, increasingly overshadowed by a larger struggle between Christianity and Islam that characterized the region to come. So Islam essentially made them double down on pushing out other religions because they're like, oh shit, Islam's trying to infiltrate. Can't have that, and they're fighting us. Fuck that. It's worth noting that this period represented a critical juncture in the history of the Byzantine Empire and the broader religious landscape overall. With that focus on internal religious dissent, including paganism, it sustained the conditions that marginalized everyone they considered heretics. If you're a Warhammer fan, they would call it heresy and, start going like fucking up people. Almost like Inquisition level of fucking up people. Okay. In 610 to 641, we have the reign of Heraclius. It was a period of significant transformation and turmoil for the Byzantine Empire. Taking power after overthrowing the unpopular emperor Phocas, Heraclius was initially confronted with a dire situation. The empire was under invasion for the Sasanian Empire of Persia, and portions of the eastern territories, including important cities like Antioch and Jerusalem, had been lost. Heraclius undertook a daring campaign against the Persians that would eventually lead to victory. Notably, he recovered the True Cross, a revered Christian relic that had been captured by the Persians when they sacked Jerusalem. His defeat of the Persians has often been cited as one of the Byzantine Empire's most significant military achievements. However, no sooner had Heraclius defeated one foe than another emerged, Islam. With the rapid rise of Islam under the Prophet Muhammad and his successors presented a new, unforeseen challenge. Byzantine territories in the Levant, long accustomed to religious diversity and containing significant Jewish and Christian communities, quickly fell under Islamic control following Muhammad's death. The Muslims defeated a Byzantine army at the Battle of Yarmouk in 636 AD, leading to the loss of Syria and Palestine, and significantly affecting Heraclius' later years. The battle was a major turning point and has been cited as one of the most decisive battles in military history. Very interesting battle. I think I might get into it in its own episode eventually. Despite these military challenges, Heraclius also embarked on administrative reforms that had a long-lasting impact. He restructured the empire's administrative divisions and made attempts to standardize religious practice across the empire. In particular, he sought to unify various Christian sects under the banner of the Chalcedonian Christianity. Although this led to tensions and dissent among non-Chalcedonian Christians. Again, it's all about if you can keep your people under one banner, you can keep them all controlled. But as soon as people start questioning and asking too many questions, it causes a lot of issues for those in power, the aristocracy, really. As for religious minorities, the pagans within the empire, Heraclius was less focused on them, so they get a little bit of a reprieve here than some of his predecessors or successors, primarily because the urgent military crisis of his reign demanded his attention elsewhere. However, the institutional framework for the suppression of paganism, as stated earlier, remained intact. So essentially, Heraclius didn't actively, add more pressure onto them. He didn't have to. The pressure was already there, and it kept going during his reign. So here in 674 is where we have the first Arab siege of Constantinople. It lasted from 674 to 678 AD. It was a pivotal moment, not just for the Byzantine Empire, but also for the trajectory of Islamic expansion. Conducted by the Umayyad Caliphate, the siege aimed to capture the capital and, by extension, deal a crippling blow to Byzantine power in the region. Constantinople was not just a political center, but also a spiritual one for Eastern Orthodox Christianity, and its fall would have tremendous religious implications. Essentially, everyone, instead of being Christian, like most people in Europe being Christian, most people would have been Muslim in Europe, and Islam probably would have taken over, which is crazy. The siege was notable for the introduction of Greek fire, a Byzantine invention that was crucial in the defense of the city. The incendiary weapon could stick to ships and water surfaces, making it devastatingly effective. Its usage by the Byzantine navy was pivotal in repelling the Umayyad fleet, which was unprepared for such a technological innovation. To be fair, I would not be expecting my enemy to throw fire that can stick to water at me either. That's kind of fucking insane to think about. The Byzantines mounted siphons on their ships to spray the volatile substance, and it could even be used in handheld tubes. They had flamethrowers, essentially. Its exact composition remains a mystery, but it was a closely guarded state secret, and its impact on the siege was undeniable. It saved their asses. The siege also had significant logistical challenges for both sides. The Umayyad forces had to operate far from their bases in the Levant, stretching their supply lines. The Byzantines, on the other hand, were under immense strain to maintain the defense of their capital, so food and resources would have been in short supply, and the psychological toll on the population must have been considerable. Yet the fortifications to Constantinople, built by Emperor Theodosius II in the 5th century, and known as the Theodosian Walls, provided an effective defense that the Umayyads couldn't breach. They didn't think about like climbing over it at all. Well, I mean, they probably did, but just couldn't. It's just really fucking hard to. The failure of the siege had wide-reaching consequences. It effectively halted the westward expansion of the Caliphate and secured the Byzantine Empire's position as a buffer between the Islamic world and Europe. The Byzantines even launched a counteroffensive after the siege, gaining some territory and securing a more favorable position in subsequent peace treaties. So financial reparations paid by the Umayyads as a part of the peace agreement provided the Byzantine Empire with much-needed funds they lost due to the war. The unsuccessful siege laid bare the limits of Umayyad military power and served as a rallying point for the Byzantines. The events reinforced the sense of divine protection over Constantinople. God was in their corner. God was helping them out when it really mattered. And, someone else that believed in a slightly different God was trying to fuck with them. That's when God steps in. He's like, oh, no. Oh, no. They believe in that other God? No, it's me. That's when I help you. That's the only time. When you guys are like suffering and like, poor and shit and like starving, fuck you guys. But when someone believes in someone other than me, that's, I'll empower you guys. Fucking shitty. In broader terms, the failure of the siege represented a significant setback for the Islamic Caliphate's ambitions in Europe and a pivotal moment in the geopolitical and religious landscape for the Mediterranean. Which is why we have, again, more Christians than other religions. So, here in AD 717 to 718, we have the second siege, attempted siege of Constantinople. It was another monumental episode in the tug-of-war between Islamic Caliphate and the Christian Empire, Byzantine Empire. The siege was orchestrated by the Caliph Sulayman ibn al-Malik, and it represented a second earnest attempt to capture the jewel of the Byzantine Empire. A successful siege would not only have geopolitical ramifications, but also deliver a significant blow to Christendom. Once again, the Byzantines employed Greek fire as a defensive measure. This highly effective incendiary weapon, as stated earlier, had previously repelled the forces in the first siege, and this time it was no different. Which is crazy. You think, like, if they're going to attempt a siege again, they would have been like, okay, so that weird fire shit that they spouted at us that stick to water? Maybe we should figure out a way to repel that or come up with something. And they're like, nah, if we just send enough people at them, they can't burn us all. So ships equipped with Greek fire devastated the Arab navy, effectively neutralizing one of the principal components of the Umayyad siege machine. It wasn't just the technology that made the difference, but the expertise with which the Byzantine navy used it, demonstrating that the weapon had evolved not just in composition, but also in tactical application. They found new ways to apply this shit, man. It was crazy. Their flamethrowers got better. They could launch it like super far, burn the shit out of everyone. It was nuts. The siege was further complicated by external factors, notably the harsh winter and inadequate logistical support for the Umayyad troops. The winter of 717 to 718 was exceptionally cold, which took a toll on the invaders. Famine and disease were rife within the Umayyad camp, leading to a significant loss of morale and combat effectiveness. They were like, fuck this shit, man. We're dying to winter and starvation. There's no point. The Byzantines, on the other hand, were able to resupply via the sea because of their effective naval dominance that allowed them relatively free movement. So they're able to keep getting supplies, whereas the Umayyad Caliphate could not. That's very important in war. So Byzantine diplomacy also played a role in the empire's successful defense. Emperor Leo III secured the assistance of the Bulgar Khan Tervel, who attacked the Umayyad forces from the rear, hitting them from the ass, inflicting further casualties and sapping their will to continue the siege. This alliance not only provided immediate military assistance, but also signaled the potential for future alliances against common threats, reinforcing the Byzantine Empire's position in the region. They were the shit. You go to them for everything. The failure of the Second Arab Siege had long-lasting repercussions. The Byzantine victory provided a morale boost and a sense of divine favor. Again, this is like double confirmation. Christian God was the right God. And no one else should be allowed to, saying which god is which. They were right, and their victory proved that. Same shit that the Romans did with their pagan beliefs. They're like, hey, the pagan gods helped us win here. It was totally pagan gods and not just like us, being better at combat or war and us being smarter than our opponent. It was the gods. The gods helped us. Crazy how no one just, maybe that's them trying to be less egotistical and narcissistic about themselves. But they should have been, all these guys should have been proud of themselves. It just demonstrated how intelligent they were. The siege was also instrumental in consolidating the position of Emperor Leo III, whose Isaurian dynasty would rule Byzantium for several more decades. The successful defense of Constantinople against such overwhelming odds reaffirmed the strategic importance of the city and demonstrated the resilience and adaptability of the Byzantine military technology and diplomacy. Okay. That was technically our main quarrel, right? It was the two sieges. But since this is to lead into Empress Irene and kind of like my final statement on how Christianity would impact the world, we're going to go over a few more events, and then next week we're going to go into Empress Irene's life. So, in AD 726, while Leo III is in charge, we have the initiation of iconoclasm. It was a watershed moment, or again, pivotal moment, in the Byzantine religious and political life. Iconoclasm means icon smashing, and it was essentially a policy that opposed the veneration of icons and religious images. Leo III, possibly influenced by the monotheistic Islamic faith of the neighboring Umayyad Caliphate, ordered the removal of the revered image of Christ from the chalk gate of the imperial palace, replacing it with a plain cross. This act ignited a controversy that divided the empire and the broader Christian world for more than a century. Really pissed off a lot of people. They're like, well, it's Jesus. That's the guy we worship. Like, what the fuck? While the reasons for Leo III's stance on icons are complex and debated by historians, some scholars argue that he saw the military successes of Islam and its prohibition against images as a sign that the Christian veneration of icons had led the Byzantine Empire astray. Essentially, God didn't support them as much because they were fucking up in one area. It's just so sad. It's so fucked up. If that is the truth. So another theory posed that Leo's background, rooted in the more austere Christian traditions of the eastern provinces, influenced his policy. The emperor and his supporters argued that the veneration of icons bordered on idolatry and was a distortion of true Christian beliefs. Resistance to Leo's policy was both immediate and intense. Monks, some Christian monks who were some of the most devoted iconophiles or icon lovers, like they would try and excuse their weird fetish by saying free love, sort of love, led protests and even rebellions against the imperial decree, chanting things like down with oppression, my love is an expression, and did a 2-hour-long concert about their love of icons. My favorite song that I found, I decided to recreate for you. So please enjoy. I see that Leo's on the rise. I see trouble on the way. I see paintings tear inside. I see bad times today. Don't go around tonight. We'll tempt your icon down. Ah, fuck that up, alright. Or definitely nothing like that. They probably didn't actually have like a 2-hour hippie, like 70s, little movement there. But I like to pretend. I like to have fun. If you want to hear the rest of that, I'll probably just put it at the end of the episode. I did do a full parody of Creedence Clearwater's Bad Moon Rising. But it's Leo rising. So they argued, the monks, icons were not objects of worship, but rather served as conduits for the veneration of the divine. The religious polarization was further exacerbated by the deep-rooted cultural differences between Latin West and Greek East, making the issue not just a religious one, but also political and cultural divide. Pope Gregory II vehemently opposed Leo's policy, leading to a theological feud between the papacy and the Byzantine Empire. The Pope viewed the veneration of icons as a long-standing Christian tradition that was not idolatrous but inspirational. This disagreement added another layer of tension to an already strained relationship, further alienating the Western and Eastern branches of Christianity and contributing to the eventual schism. Much how, like, if your significant other that likes to eat rice decides that you can now only eat everything, like only plain rice, like no toppings anymore. She's like, well, since we decided that you're going to be with me and you want to stay in this relationship and you understand that if you want to be with me, my family only eats rice. We kind of have issues with you actually eating those toppings. You can't actually do that. And then you're like, babe, please don't fucking do this to me. Please, I love you. I thought I proved it when I switched and I converted and all I eat is rice now. And you just keep taking things away from me. And then she's like, well, you know what? You stop being a little bitch. And then slaps the fuck out of you. And you're now trapped in an abusive relationship that you feel like you can't escape because you're in too deep. It's there's no point. You're already in this deep. Might as well just keep going for it. And to be honest, the sex is pretty good. Like you're like, like she hits it good. So, and she lets you do anal. So that's the other. The other problem with trying to leave is you might not be able to get anal again. So who knows? Leo III's iconoclastic policy had lasting ramifications. In the immediate term, it led to widespread social unrest and divided the empire's Christian community. Even after the end of the initial period of iconoclasm, the policy was revived under later emperors, perpetuating the ideological conflict within Christendom. Because again, this is the issue with Christianity. There's too many fucking ways to interpret things that were said. More broadly, iconoclasm became one of the seminal issues that contributed to the eventual separation of the Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox churches, a division that still persists today. That's right. Modern day, we have Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox now. So lots of fun. And it can actually be kind of seen with America and Russia, or like Russia and like other European countries, where other European Christian countries are primarily Roman Catholic, and Russia, their main religion was the Eastern Orthodox Church. Okay, and then AD 732, we had the Battle of Tours, which is Frankish and Burgundian forces under Charles Martel that halted the advance of the Umayyad Caliphate into Europe. There's a very pivotal moment that, again, kind of just reinforcing this belief that Christian God was the right God. Okay, and then in AD 751, we have the donation of Pepin. The donation of Pepin in 751 AD was a very pivotal moment in the relationship between secular and ecclesiastical powers in Europe, especially concerning the Pope and the emerging Carolingian dynasty. Pepin the Short, son of Charles Martel and father of Charlemagne, had recently assumed the title of King of the Franks after deposing the Merovingian king. To consolidate his rule and gain ecclesiastical support, Pepin sought to forge a strong alliance with the Pope after routing the Lombards, who had been a thorn in the side of the papacy. They were really pissing off the Pope. The Pope was like, get him to freaking out of here. I hate this guy. Pepin offered the conquered territories to Pope Stephen II. This act laid the foundation for the Papal States, a series of territories in the Italian peninsula under the direct rule of the Pope. This is why the Pope will be so important for all empires to come. They essentially become their own empire. This land grant was significant for several reasons. First, it marked the Pope's transition from being a religious leader to a temporal ruler, responsible for both the spiritual and earthly well-being of his subjects. This dual role would complicate and often strain the Pope's relationships with European monarchs for centuries to come, because they were just as powerful as the kings. God damn it. And that's a big issue. The creation of papal states also made the Pope a significant independent actor in the geopolitical chessboard of medieval Europe, enabling the papacy to pursue its own policies and military actions without having to rely entirely on external powers for protection and manipulating empires and their courts like they had been for the past, 400 years now. So the donation of Pepin further cemented the Carolingian dynasty's role as protectors of the Christian faith and its institutions. This alliance between the Franks and the papacy proved enduring, reaching its zenith with the coronation of Charlemagne as Holy Roman Emperor by Pope Leo III in 800 AD. This relationship bestowed upon the Carolingian rulers a divine imprimatur that elevated their status and expanded their influence in matters both religious and secular. Furthermore, the Papal States served as a bulwark against various forces that threatened to encroach upon Rome and its environs, whether they were Muslim armies from the south or rival Christian kingdoms from the north. Because again, Christianity, if they heretics were pushed out and then forced to go worship other places, and other people were like, actually, I kind of get that, and so they formed kingdoms. The donation of Pepin thus had a stabilizing effect on a region that had been characterized by strife and invasion, providing the Pope with the resources and autonomy to influence broader European politics. As stated earlier, the Byzantine Empire was a key player in the broader Christian world and strengthening the strengthening of the papacy through the donation of Pepin had indirect implications for them as well. The donation may have been viewed by the Byzantines with a combination of relief and concern. Relief that the Pope had a buffer against Lombard incursions, but concerned about the growing power of the Frankish kingdom, which could rival Byzantine influence in Italy and other parts of Europe. They're like, these motherfuckers, they're going to start stepping on our toes. We gotta watch them. So they started watching them a lot more and started getting a little more weary about what the fuck was going to go on. So this donation was not merely a transaction of land. It was a complex and far-reaching act that reshaped the religious, political, and territorial landscape of medieval Europe. By doing so, it created a precedent for the temporal power of the papacy and fortified the Papal States as a critical entity in geopolitical dynamics of the continent. And this, my listeners, is where we're going to end today's historical whirl. All right, guys, that brings us to the end of today's episode. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I know that was a lot of information, a lot of things that we went over, and goddamn, watching Christians essentially from the beginning of these episodes, from Emperor Nero, be this like marginalized sect that gets the shit kicked out of it, to owning like its own empire, and then like being in complete control of like two other empires is insane. So, great things rise from the humblest of beginnings. And unfortunately, this is a great and terrible thing that happened with the destruction of literature, the suppression of free thought, of pagan sciences. I mean, pagans did it too, but with the Christians, all they offered was like a solution for after death. They didn't really offer any insights into, well, kind of. Some of it would offer insights into the modern world and like the way the world works, and they try to answer some questions, but they were rigid, very rigid in how to answer those questions, where I feel like the pagans were more open to free thought and interpretation than other religions were. Overall, my thoughts are crazy shit. Excited for the next episode. I need to get to recording that here soon, so I'll be doing that here in just a minute. In not this next week's episode, nor this episode, but the following week's episode, I'll read some emails that I got today. Honestly, I got a couple today, so I'll read those out in the next couple weeks and respond to those via voice. You guys will get to hear from me directly on the show, and I'll talk to you directly on here. But let me know your thoughts. If you guys found any enjoyment out of this, or you found this to be worth your time, please give it a like and a follow. Please leave a review. That would really help the show, help grow the show even more, any more than you guys already have, with you guys already sharing it with people that you feel like would enjoy this. But if you leave a review too, that really does impact our metrics and helps other people see that the show is worthwhile, and it's not just something it's not just like another one of those shitty shows. See, the host, me, I put in work. I do put in work for this. I like to research and go pretty heavy into my research for this. That's all. I seriously appreciate you guys for listening. You have a good one, and you'll hear from me next week with the Empress Irene. So bye-bye. I hear change is coming in. I know the end is coming soon. I fear the bishops will commit a sin. I hear the voice of ancient runes. Don't go round tonight, they're bound to tear your icon down. There's a Leo on the rise. Yeah, alright. Hope you got your prayers together. Hope you read your Psalms. Looks like we're in for nasty weather. Oh no, Leo's taking arms. Don't go round tonight, they're bound to tear your icon down. There's a Leo on the rise. Don't go round tonight, they're bound to tear your icon down. There's a Leo on the rise.